Good.
All right, Joanne,
All righty.
did you want to read it,
Yep.
Joanna?
Yep. Good day. My name is Joanna Leon, and I am the membership manager here at WERC, now powered by MHI. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us for today's presentation. Today's webinar is being recorded and all participants are in listen-only mode. At the end of today's presentation, we will have a question and answer period. You will be able to ask your questions through the Q&A or chat section located at the bottom of your screen or along the right-hand side, depending on your settings. So without further ado, I would like to turn the presentation over to today's host, Michael Wohlwend.
Actually, Brenda Stoltz.
Yes. So good morning, everyone. My name is Brenda Stoltz, and I am one of the senior manager and directors of the Alpine Supply Chain Solutions, specifically helping lead our HR solutions practices. So I've got over 10 years of supply chain experience, pretty evenly split between HR and operations. And I am excited to moderate today's topic for Michael Wohlwend. So Michael Wohlwend, I'll let him introduce himself, but the founder and leader of Alpine Supply Chain Solutions, and he's going to be sharing some of his knowledge today. So I'll turn it over to Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Brenda. So for those of you that don't know me, I am passionate about work. I used to attend while I was at university, and now a former past president of the Work National Board, and being in Chicago, work's always had a little special spot in my heart. So I'm really glad to be here today. And quite honestly, what a topic, right? Post supply chain or post COVID supply chain. And it's kind of in a culmination of a few of our clients. So I'm really excited to share that with you guys today. So our agenda is really going to address this, right? So we're uncovering, addressing the hidden risks in everybody's supply chain, identifying your vulnerabilities, diversifying your supply base, hold immediate inventory or safety stock, which is driving up costs, which is running out of space. And we're seeing a lot of 3PLs benefiting from this. Take advantage of process innovation. How can I do more with less, right? Specifically labor. And then revisit the trade-off between product variety and capacity flexibility. It's a really interesting topic, and I'm really excited that you're here to join us today. So let's talk about our agenda. We're going to talk about the China Plus One and or nearshore strategy. We're going to talk about transportation initiatives and how that's impacted. What is your e-commerce strategy and how are you doing on it? What's your current and future automation initiatives and how is that going to impact your operation? What about sustainability? Today, we're seeing more and more organizations really focused on their sustainability initiatives. And then how can you make sure that your warehouse is evolving? And then last but not least, as you're evolving, are you adopting some of the top 10 emerging technologies? So with that being said, let's jump in. So as soon as everybody's supply chain got disrupted, the question was, what's your China Plus One strategy? Now, believe it or not, what we're starting to see more and more is that Mexico, India, Vietnam are starting to be more prevalent locations where a lot of our clients are actually sourcing their material from. Now, what's interesting about that is that you're going to start to see some different incentives out there, right? Do you need to refresh your nearshore strategy? Are you taking advantage of tariff incentives for small and medium-sized businesses as part of the USMCA? So we have a client and they have made a decision that they're going to move 50% of their manufacturing to Mexico. In doing so, they reduce the cost per unit by $10. What happens is the manufacturing team gets the hurrah, we've reduced our manufacturing costs. But unfortunately, the logistics team takes a penalty because now it's going to actually cost them $6 more a unit for transportation by moving it to Mexico. So when you start to look at your strategy, you also need to make an understanding that manufacturing might win, transportation costs might go up, and how do you look at an overall net win for the company? So that's just one example of something that we're seeing out there. Now, has your company increased levels of inventory on certain products and why? I can tell you that I'm usually in 2 to 3 warehouses a week, and we're seeing a predominant increase of overall inventory being held. And it's either we are worried about the supply chain disruption, or we just knew that the product is available, so we're going to take it just so that we don't run out of it. And what that does is that has a huge impact on your storage needs. Maybe today you're using bulk floor storage, or maybe you're using single deep selective rack. And now instead of having 6 items on hand, you're 24 pallets of the same item on hand, which would mean that you should do either, drive-in rack or pushback rack. So it's going to change your storage density profile as well as the sourcing location. How is it going to impact your transportation budget, your lead time, and your overall cost per item? You got to make sure that you're thinking about that and how it's impacting your operation. All right. Again, Brenda, any thoughts here? Any questions that we need to answer from anybody on the chat or in the session yet?
Not yet, but I do want to remind everyone, if you do have a question, please use the Q&A or the chat box. I will be monitoring that and make sure that I ask.
All right, so China plus one and or near source strategy, check. Let's talk about transportation. So now, right, what's going to happen if I'm going to change my supply strategy? How's it going to impact my transportation? So number one, if you think about how do you manage your transportation, what do you got out there, right? So you got LTL, you got truckload, you got parcel, you got air, you got rail. Now, what's interesting is we don't see on here ocean. And right now there's a record number of ships outside of Long Beach. And right now, what normally costs about $6,000 for a container is about $32,000. Companies are paying it, and they're still not able to get onto the ships. So the demand right now for the holiday season and trying to get vessels to take your cargo, it's a never-ending battle. But how are you managing, and what kind of transportation do you have out there, right? What's the following strategies you can use to cut your freight costs? So one of these projects we recently had, it was great. We put the transportation out to bid. So it says, hey, right, did you run an annual procurement event? So we do it every 2 or 3 years. And then the second part is we were meeting with that team as we were onboarding quarterly to see what metrics were in place, what's changing, why it's changing, and be able to see if there's some things we could do differently. But also, analytics, right? So, hey, we understand that the market's variable and the prices go up and the demand's high, but we need to make sure that we set some strategies with regards to our pricing, okay? And how can we actually reduce our freight costs? Go ahead, Brenda.
When you look at some of these strategies, is there one that you think is more effective or has a higher return on investment than the rest?
It depends. And the reason I say it depends is we have some customers that have their own fleet. So they're really leveraging their fleet and their backhauls to reduce their total costs. On the flip side, we have other customers that outsource and use a transportation service provider like Redwood Logistics. And, even Redwood has a great partnership with them, but there's some things that they can't control. And then we have some other customers that do 90% parcel, but the 10% that they do LTL, they use an outside brokerage firm. So each company is going to solve the transportation needs differently. And depending on what's more important to them, if they're asset-based, non-asset-based, parcel, right, ocean, air, freight, all of these are going to be different for them. But at the end of the day, I believe, running a procurement cycle every 2 to 3 years and have a quarterly meeting with your, predominant carrier or transportation provider or brokerage firm to make sure that you're understanding what changed and why they changed, and make sure there's an open line of communication. So that's what I would suggest. All right. Thinking about if any of these, if you use to manage more than 20% of your freight costs. So believe it or not, transportation software is still a viable solution. We talked about that, right? You got Mercury Gate is out there. Cloud Logistics got bought by E2Open. Keywill turned in and got acquired by E2Open as well. So you're starting to see some consolidation out there. You got some best of breed. Oracle's OTM is still a viable option. And then you've got WMS and TMS providers alike, Manhattan and Blue Yonder, that have a viable solution that comes together. So we're starting to see more and more of that being managed in that capacity. And then with regards to the transportation software that you use, it's all over the board. Syntelic does a great job of making sure that you maximize the optimization of a full load. Looking at tools like Uber Freight now, doing some of the work boards and the managing, looking at different freight payment and audit, and looking at different things out there to help you manage your transportation costs. But there's a lot of different types of software out there that can help different types of people with their different types of transportation. All right, reasons for using it: obviously reduce cost, improve customer service, and optimize your network. All right, so we talked about China Plus One, talked about the transportation initiatives. Let's jump into the e-commerce strategy. Do you have an e-commerce strategy? What is it? Well, hey, right, the Amazon effect or the COVID effect. Now we're shipping direct to home, or we're picking eaches. We never did that before. How's that impacting your operation? All of that's viable, but what's interesting is the returns experience is key to customer satisfaction and retention. More importantly, how are you measuring it? This was a very interesting process for a third-party logistics provider. And they had done a lot of HBC, custom jewelry, those types of things. And then they signed their very, very first shoe company. So all of a sudden, they're shipping out all these shoes and life is great. But what they didn't realize is the amount of returns. So, shoes are pretty big. Their returns processing area got really, really small, and they weren't able to keep up. They had to track a pair of shoes through 5 pallets to find it to give a returns credit. So when you start thinking about your e-commerce strategy, think with the end in mind. What is my returns experience going to be? Can our customers, have a better experience, and can we retain them? So will we pay for the shipping? Will we be able to track the return items? Is an RAN needed? What's the policy window? What's the time to actually get the actual process and refund? These are the key metrics as part of your e-commerce strategy. All right. Current and future automation initiatives. So I think today more than ever, everybody understands that we've got labor challenges. I can't tell you that I've walked into a warehouse and they've said, oh, yeah, we got plenty of labor. So, right, first Amazon bumps it up to $15 an hour, then the COVID, people are reinventing themselves, they're getting different jobs in different industries. And so what's happening is the cost of labor is going up, the cost of technology and automation is coming down, and that tipping point is becoming more justifiable. So 10 situations where automation makes sense. Number one, productivity needs to go up. Throughput needs to go up. And it can be very simple. We have a client that's had about 25 people doing replenishments on a daily basis. And we figured out that they would move between 50 and 55 pallets of a single item, picking eaches in a week's time. You do not pick that out of case flow. You put that on pallet flow and have several pallets of it. And so just by changing the mechanism in which they picked, they were able to increase productivity and throughput. Better accuracy is needed. So not only would they do that, but we actually put a pick to light on the pallet flow location and the case flow locations. So usually you're going to get about 100 to 125 lines per hour using pick to light, and it increases your picking accuracy. Goods can easily be inventory or transported. So whether it's a conveyor or an AGV, where you can actually leverage some sort of technology to move product in the facility to minimize your pickers travel or your replenishers travel. The workforce is aging and needs to be more ergonomic. So believe it or not, we've had a lot of customers that have had dedicated teams for 20, 25, 30 plus years. I was recently in a facility in Cincinnati, and the individual had been there for 35 years and was getting ready to retire. So you can find that in the Midwest, it's still out there, but as the workforce is aging, you might need to change your processes. There's a need to limit exposure or harsh environment. So we've done a lot of projects in a temperature controlled environment, frozen, blast freezer, cooler. A lot of people don't want to be working in that type of temperature on a daily basis. So can we develop a system where the automation is storing the product and the picker or the packer is actually doing it outside of the harsh environment? What happens if you need to increase security or safety? Is there a proliferation of stock units, right? I remember Miller Brewing said we would need no more than 8 SKUs. Now Miller Brewing's probably got thousands of SKUs with all the different beer and the different SKU proliferation across their typical brand. Space is limited. So we got space, equipment, labor, and control. Those are your 4 assets. If you are running out of space, you're going to spend some money on automation to maximize that space to stay in your footprint. And then the other one is desire to save energy and be greener. So I talked a little bit about the sustainability, right? Thinking about it, is there a desire to be more green, right? Automated equipment allows companies to handle items in a smaller footprint and, you know, can save them on costs as well as space and lighting. So,
Michael, we've got a question from one of our attendees here. So they'd like to know, what do you see as the top automation solutions for productivity and throughput?
So right now, from a top automation, I think the easiest to justify has been, you know, cartonization. So you have a WMS that allows you to cartonize your order. And then that combined with a pick-to-light, you're getting 100 to 125 lines per hour, picking each as directly into a carton and being able to, you know, literally have a void fill, inline scale, top taper, and out the door. So that's probably number one. Right behind that, we're starting to do a couple of installs with some AGVs. So you have a, you know, 80% of your volume comes from 20% of your SKUs. You got this fast pick area, you're able to put it together on your B minus and C items, rather than traveling hundreds of thousands of square feet to go through some bin shelves. You can actually set up your AGVs to complement your A pick area. And then, you know, somewhere in between the pick to light at 125 lines per hour and, you know, 75 out of case flow, you know, voice at 90 lines per hour and around the same as that AGV is kind of where we're seeing it. Now, we've recently tried to do a few different goods to person ROIs. And with a long tail, we found that a goods to person technology works really, really well. Now, depending on the size and the velocity, we've been able to justify a couple of OPEX perfect pick. And then with the long tail, we were able to justify some of the gray orange devices. But in those situations, it's not necessarily as much about the throughput and the productivity as it is to minimize the actual travel and trying to look at an alternative solution rather than relying on labor. So I know that's a well-rounded answer. There's no silver bullet for every environment because everybody receives, stores, picks, and ships, but the commodity, the velocity, the cube movement, the order profile in every scenario is going to drive a different solution. But that's a great, great question. Thank you so much. All right. I was talking about sustainability. There's no business on a dead planet. So what are we doing to make sure that our warehouses are able to be as sustainable as possible, right? So thinking about the buildings that use the most energy in the US is number one, 41%, industrials 30, and transportation's 29. We got to reduce the energy costs. We got to, you know, enhance the brand reputation. We got to increase customer and staff loyalty, improve risk. So, you know, it's a focus that we need to focus on. Obviously, there's different levels of LEED, silver, gold, platinum. As we're starting to build more and more distribution centers, we're trying to figure out how we can get LEED certified and how we can do that. One of the companies we work with is Helios Lighting. They'll come in and do an audit and an assessment. And when you build a new building, usually there's, you know, hey, we want 30 candlelight at 5-foot level. But the minute you put rack in and you do this and you do that, that dissipates really quickly. So once you get your facility, once you get your layout, work with Helios to take a look at what lighting should be used, what rebates are available, what types of motion sensors we can look at from the lighting perspective. Another one's the big ass fans, right? I mean, they are up there and they are moving and they're helping keep distribution centers cool and making sure that they're being efficient, as well as the water with regards to any of the processing. We talked also about just natural light, right? Looking at different ways to actually pop holes in the ceiling to get the natural light. Early in my career, I did a project in Salt Lake City, Utah, and they did the pack out on the second level, and the whole warehouse had these big open windows, and every day you could sit there and look at the mountains while you were packing out orders. It's beautiful, and it's being able to do those types of things. We had a facility here in Chicago, and I mean, we put in maybe 20 of these, in their facility, and it changed the demeanor of the team, the natural lighting, the mood. It really enlightened the facility. So just talking about, natural light. More sustainable solutions. So batteries are becoming more and more a topic of discussion with the ion batteries, and being able to look at it from that perspective, or actually hydrogen cells, and being able to look at that all the way across, laser writing labels for totes, and reusable totes and reusable pallets. So we're starting to see more and more organizations think about green and how they can make that an impact within their facility. All right, so we got 2 left, right? 6 signs of warehouse evolution, and where is your organization and the importance of adoption of top 10 technologies. All right, so first and foremost, what are the 6 signs of warehouse evolution? Number 1, rising e-commerce volumes are forcing companies to increase their warehouse and distribution capacity. No doubt about it, right? Going from cases or pallets in and out to eaches, now people are trying to figure out how they're going to be able to increase the volumes and get that through their facility. Number 2, what capacity will come from more smaller facilities? So what's interesting is today, the spread between a regional DC, a central DC, a local DC, and stores versus in the future. We just did a distribution network analysis for a client. They want 98% next day coverage. 98% next day coverage. They had to have 5 distribution centers. So they have 1 central DC in Chicago today, but now being able to hit 98% of the US next day required them to add 4 more DCs to be able to make that coverage. We have another client that literally has 39 branches and 2 major DCs. And looking at the service level of coming out of the 2 DCs to the 39 branches and the overlap, it's really trying to figure out exactly how they can, standardize, maybe consolidate, minimize transportation costs. But that's just a natural progression that we're starting to see more frequent, smaller facilities closer to the customer, because everybody wants it either same day or next day. All right. Companies will look to actually leverage third party to help them handling these grow volumes, and they'll select 3PLs based on their network, reach, flexibility, and array of services. So as we said, like, hey, all right, fine, I need 5 DCs. They weren't going to go build 5 distribution centers themselves. They went to a third-party logistics provider. We put it out to bid. We led a selection. We awarded the contract, and we started to work with them to onboard these 5 DCs. Same system, same parcel manifesting solution, same carrier, using their rates, but using somebody else's building and somebody else's labor to address it. So we're starting to see more and more needs for third-party logistics providers out there to help with the evolution. All right. Meanwhile, the struggle to find and retain good workers will persist, even and accelerated. So today, we think it's challenging. It's even going to get harder in the future. How do we attract the right talent? How do we hire the right talent? And then of the people we have, who are our best employees? How do we retain them? And the ones that are in the middle or to lower end, how do we get them the right training to make them one of our top performing employees? So I know this is near and dear to your heart, Brenda. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think this is an area where we've seen struggles for quite some time now. But I think as we went into COVID, the biggest shift that we see now is that, understanding how many employees you have in a warehouse was somewhat unreliable, right? Maybe you needed 100 to get through your peak season, and you were probably only going to hire 50. And so you would try to make it up with some temporary associates. I think the struggle now is not only do you need to think about it from that perspective, but you also need to add a component of reliability, meaning, yes, maybe you have 50 people on the payroll, but because, of illness, of potential illness, of symptoms, they now have to call in, or maybe they're on a quarantine, right? And obviously you want them to do the things that's best for their health and the health of their peers. And so you're not necessarily going to hold them accountable, but you still need people to get the product out, right? So if your current staffing model doesn't have reliability built into it, that's where we're really seeing some clients struggle, right? Because they don't understand day to day why they don't have the people that they need, but it's because they're not actually fully planning for all of the different variables that you have to take into account today.
That's a great point. Thank you. All right, warehouse and disruption will probably become an organizational priority. It probably already is, but it's just going to grow. So what they were saying is that by 2030, 88% of the survey respondents expect warehousing and distribution to become a company priority. You know, when I used to say, what do you do? Oh, I'm in supply chain. Nobody knew what that was until COVID and disruption, and nobody can get the furniture. And then there's a block in a river, and then you can't get through the Panama Canal. So all of a sudden now today, more than ever, you know, supply chain is a vernacular that most people know and understand. All right, number 6, to cope with growing operational complexities, companies will increasingly turn to robust software systems. So believe it or not, this one kind of surprised me. I mean, WMS has been around for a while, warehouse management system, right? And the warehouse execution system is if you have a really weak WMS, but you want to handle some automation, there's, you know, WCS, warehouse control system, directs things in the warehouse, but the WES can help bridge the gap of the WMS. But the one I thought was interesting was the order management system. But it makes sense. If I have 5 DCs and I've got aging inventory or high inventory levels or, you know, service level window or transportation, where should I have that order get picked from? And where should it actually be sourced from? And maybe it's, you know, taking it to the next level. If you're a multi-channel retailer, you might actually pick and ship orders out of the store to get rid of some of the aging inventory versus the DC. So makes sense for sure. All right. So we talked about China plus one, talked about our nearshore strategy, how it impacts your overall transportation initiatives, talked about the e-commerce strategy and customer returns is a very part of it. Talked about our current and future automation initiatives, talked about sustainability initiatives and how that can actually impact your operation. We said the 6 signs of warehouse evolution. So where is your organization on the importance and adoption of top 10 emerging technologies? So,
Hey, Michael, before we
yes.
jump into that, we do have a comment from one of our attendees.
Okay.
Or a question. As the warehouses become smarter, should companies begin investing in education for their current workforce?
It's interesting. The highest demand that we are going to see in the warehouse is going to be technicians. So whether it's being able to address a conveyor, an inline scale, a pick to belt, an AGV, a goods to person, being able to reslot the facility. So that technical aspect, it's very, very far and few between. A lot of organizations have chosen to outsource that with a field technician or partner with their material handling provider. But that resource and the demand of that resource is going to continue to grow. So I think if you've got somebody in your organization that you feel is going to be a good player, I would absolutely make investment in them to either get additional skills like these technical skills were required, or invest in them that you know, use it as a retention policy, help them either get a college degree or even more, you know, maybe a master's if they already have a college degree. So I think investing in your people is always going to be a good solution. Any thoughts on that, Brenda? I mean, that's an area of your expertise there.
Yeah, you know, I think I definitely agree with what you said. And I think, you know, the key there is, hey, as warehouses get smarter, right? So I think this is true, right? As we add automation, as we add new technologies to the warehouse, one, you have to be conscious of how that's going to impact your current workforce, and then 2, the workforce you're trying to attract. And so I think both of those workforces training is only going to help you retain them even more, right? So for your current workforce, sometimes it can be really intimidating to have a new technology, and they can start to feel like, this is why you get the concerns about like, oh, they're adding automation because they're trying to replace us, right? You don't want them to feel that way. So by adding training and supporting their education, you make them feel like you're bringing them along, right? It's not that you're trying to replace them, you're really trying to make their job easier. And then as you're attracting new talent, I think that goes a long way too, right? I think nowadays, you know, workforce and turnover is another really big problem. And as they go to different warehouses, they will tend to stay with a company that they feel valued at most. And providing that training will definitely go a long way to making your employees feel valued. So absolutely.
Yeah, you're talking about the smarter and more automated facilities. I mean, Now you've got it where the ballast system and the lights is connected to the energy grid, which is connected to the battery chargers of the actual fork trucks, which have a device that shows the speeds and feeds, and that's all connected to your WMS. And that way you've got labor productivity, XYZ coordinates, and all that happening in your warehouse. So it is getting more automated, it's getting more connected. And this is a great example, is your automation tools, right? So today, I believe artificial intelligence and machine learning has predominantly been used for optimization and reorder points and purchasing. But now we're starting to see it within, hey, how can I wave better? How can I pick better? How could I slot better? So the continual evolution of using artificial intelligence and machine learning will have an impact not only outside the four walls, but on the inside of the four walls. Speaking about Internet of Things, within the four walls, and being able to talk to your lights, your fork trucks, your grid, and being able to put that together, as well as the RPA, right? Robotic process automation. We've seen a lot of layer picks out there, which is becoming a huge investment for a lot of organizations that do a lot of case picks, being able to do a layer pick, have that completely automated, or a mixed pallet case pick environment where they actually will just pick a bunch of cases to a line and they rely on the automation to actually build these mixed pallets. We've seen a lot of different ones in the food industry, the beverage industry, and it's becoming a reality. Speaking of reality, augmented reality and virtual reality. So, originally this was, going to be the new way to pick and get the hands free versus the voice and this and that. And there's pockets of success within the four walls, but where we really see this is field service. So you can have one technician back at the corporate headquarters, and you've got hundreds of people out in the field doing predictive and preventative maintenance, either in the electric industry or the utility industry or something like that. So we've really started to see that be embraced, but it will continue to grow within the four walls. Speaking of within the four walls, the digital twin, probably Gartner's #1 word last year. Alpine's very lucky to be partnering with Optricity. Optricity actually creates a digital twin of your environment to help with the slotting optimization and storage type analysis. So we believe that replicating that and then being able to simulate any changes that you would make in your facility and being able to see what that would look like before you start moving stuff. The robots, whether it's from pallet building or each picking or AGVs to minimize travel, it's big. And then the RFID is making a huge comeback, specifically in a closed loop where you can start to track all the totes and the pallets. And then more importantly, we're starting to see now Dick's has had huge success using small RFID tags in their store to locate inventory for buy online and pick up in store. So we'll start to see more and more of that happen. Blockchain for all of the financial transactions in the transportation industry, it's really a big hot item there. And then the big data. You can't do what you can't do without the data, right? So you got to really look at peak day, peak week, peak month. How does that change week over week, day over day, hour over hour, leveraging that data to be able to help you make better decisions within your facility. And then the chatbots. So even today, I went on a website, the chatbot comes up. How can I help you? What questions can I answer? It's amazing how all of the artificial intelligence and automation tools are really starting to impact overall success. So,
Michael, so we've got another.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Sorry, we got another question here. What best practices have you seen for cybersecurity protection used in conjunction with automation tools, i.e. AMRs with cloud-based control systems, etc.?
I think I even know who's asking this question. So cybersecurity and cloud and data and those types of things, it is a daunting dilemma. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? So I think the big thing right now is depending on who your cloud provider is. Do they have ethical hackers that are trying to get in? Do they have the right, data security in place? And then more importantly, do you and your organization have the right disaster recovery backup strategy? So that's an IT strategy that definitely is going to ebb and flow. as things evolve. I am on a non-for-profit organization, and it's very interesting how most recently a lot of these ransomware people are coming after universities and non-for-profit organizations because we don't have a lot of data security out there, and we're going to take the right measures to put that in place. But as an organization within your four walls of your warehouse, like, what is your backup strategy? And then how much data are you protecting from your customer? And are you able to segregate your customer's data and credit card data from your order data? So it is a strategy out there. That is not my area of expertise. I know for a fact that there's a lot of people that are very passionate about it. But I think your IT organization is going to have one strategy. Your cloud host provider is going to have another strategy. And then how you want to segregate that data within your four walls will probably be a different strategy. So not to avoid the question, I just know for a fact that there's, different approaches out there. And it's a variety depending on what's important to you and your organization. Go ahead, Brenda, and see if there's any more questions while you do that. I know that there is going to be a survey that will be sent. We appreciate that so that we can help everybody with the weekly webinar or the monthly webinars. And in fact, October 26th, mark your calendar, 4 weeks from today. It's a Tuesday, the last Tuesday of the month. We're going to have an HR Insights webinar to really talk about the labor planning, the labor scheduling, the labor shortage, and how you and your organization can actually think about where we're at in 2021 and where you need to be in 2022, 2023, and beyond. So with that being said, is there any other questions there?
I don't see any more. Thank you so much, Michael. Definitely appreciate you walking through all of the knowledge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm excited to do it. And thank you guys so much for taking time out of your busy day and schedule to be with us. And we look forward to seeing you in a month. Take care.